Did you know, with Time Warner Cable, you'll never miss a minute of your shows. Press select on your remote to start a show over from the beginning, or use look back to catch a show you missed from up to 3 days ago without using your DVR. Did you also know people forget 40% of what happened to them the day before? But if you forget the DVR, forget about it. You're covered. It's better to know. Whatever you're passionate about, Time Warner Cable invents better ways to love it even more. Time Warner Cable. Enjoy better.
Not reality, real life. And for 60 minutes, you are the star. Channel1Yuma.com presents Yuman Life, a television show about life and lifestyles in Yuma County, starring people and places you may already know or get to know on Yuman Life. Cable Channel 2 every day at 8 a.m., noon, and 8 p.m. Not reality, real life, Yuman Life from Channel1Yuma.com. Brought to you by Time Warner and the Yuma Sun. Channel 1 Yuma Productions discovers places to visit in and around Yuma.
Hi, I'm Carol Brooks. I'm the curator for the Sanguinetti House Museum, and we invite you to come down and go through our museum and our gardens, and also check out our gift shop. We have lots of Arizona and Yuma history books. Today we're going to talk about the Sanguinetti House Museum and the history of Yuma. And this very excellent map, which is our pride and joy, shows why Yuma is here. It shows the routes coming along the Gila Trail and down the Colorado River. And most people followed the Gila River along the Gila Trail. These maps, or these travelers, tended to be military explorers who were coming down here. There were a few who came along the Devil's Highway, and we'll talk about them pretty soon. The first to come into this area were the Spaniards, and Alarcón came up the Gulf of California through the Port Isabel area up to Yuma. He brought his big sailing ship up about as far as here, and then couldn't get any further, so he brought rowboats. Also coming along the Gila Trail were the 49ers looking for gold. Before them were the men in 46 who were coming along this trail to cross Yuma, through Yuma into California, and they were with the American military who were going to California during the Mexican War, and they were going to fight for California. The reason that everybody came down to Yuma was that this was the easiest place to cross the river. Yuma has quite a few firsts to its credit. We have the first bridge to be built on the Colorado River. We have the first dam to be built on the Colorado River. The first railroad came into Yuma, and the first railroad bridge built on the Colorado was built here. We also had the first airplane to come into Arizona landed at Yuma. So we have quite a few firsts to our name. The first people to live in this area were the Native Americans, and today they're known to us as the Quechans, and that's how they've always known themselves. Upriver from them were the Mojaves and the Halchadomas and the Cavalcadomes. Some of those tribes were forced out through tribal warfare into the Maricopa County area. When the Spanish first arrived, they wrote in their journals about meeting the Quechans, and they named the Quechans the Yumas, and nobody knows exactly why they were named Yumas. The Spanish wrote about the Yuma Indians. They said that they were very tall, very muscular, very broad-shouldered, very outgoing people. The Quechans were agricultural people. They planted a lot of crops after the floods had left, and they also did some hunting and gathering out in the desert. This was the armor that the Spanish were wearing when they first arrived, and you can imagine what that was like when it was 110 degrees out in the desert. And they soon changed from that, and we'll see that in just a little bit. The Spanish brought with them everything that they needed. This is a wafer press that they brought for making communion wafers for their Mass. They brought all of their religious artifacts with them. They brought all of their weapons, and in addition, they brought cattle and sheep, and lots of times they brought women and children with them also as settlers for these various communities. We're going to talk a little bit about the Spaniards and their travels through Yuma. One of the most famous people was Father Kino, and the anniversary of his death was actually 300 years ago this year. They built a mission here, brought in women and children and settlers. The reason this mission only lasted a year is because the Spanish were not very good neighbors. They let their horses out to eat the natives' crops, and they also were not very nice to the natives themselves. At one point, the natives decided they had to get rid of the Spanish if they were going to survive themselves, so they rose up and massacred the Spaniards at both locations. The Quechans were good warriors, and they liked to do battle with the other tribes up and down the river and along the Gila River. This is the uniform that the Spaniards changed to. This is a shield made out of bull hide, and then also a leather jacket made out of bull hide, with an outer coat of blue and then a shirt, a long-sleeved white shirt inside. They also wore the leggings to protect them from the thorns out in the desert. If you read the Spanish early journals, when they were first coming across the desert along the Gila route, they talked in their journals about seeing a man, apparently, who was out in the desert with his arms raised up as signaling them or in friendship. And once they got closer, they realized it was really the saguaro cactus with its upraised arms. And this was something they had never seen before, and they were fascinated by the flora that was out in this part of the country. This is an exhibit about Fort Yuma, which really was an interesting thing. This is the reason that Yuma itself was founded, more or less. Because in 1849, when all the 49ers were coming through here, there was a truly awful man by the name of John Glanton. And John Glanton had been in the Mexican War down in Mexico. After the war was over, he was scouting out for a job. The Mexican government was offering $2 for anybody who would go out and take Apache scalps, because the Apaches were raiding into Mexico, killing people, destroying things, kidnapping people. Glanton got together a gang of people who were as bad as he was, and they started taking Apache scalps. Pretty soon it occurred to them that taking an Apache scalp was dangerous, and that there was something easier to do. They started scalping Mexicans. And they found if they dressed the scalps just so, the Mexican government could not tell the difference. So they were getting paid to do that. The Mexican government eventually caught on to what was going on there. And they chased Glanton and his gang out. They ended up down below Phoenix, got into a box canyon with the Apaches after them. A number of them finally made it out of there, came at full tilt down the Gila River towards Yuma. And they got here and they found a man by the name of Abel Lincoln, who was from Massachusetts, running a ferry. And there were actually two ferries at that time. The Yumas had a ferryman who was an Irishman, and he was running the ferry for them. Abel Lincoln was down the river a ways with another ferry. When Glanton and his gang arrived and they met Lincoln, they found out that Lincoln had made $60,000 in 3 months ferrying gold seekers across the river. They saw their opportunity and they said to Lincoln, "You need a partner, don't you?" And he had no choice but to say yes. So they became partners of his, and almost immediately they started treating the Yumas poorly. They went over and kidnapped the chief's daughter and some other girls, drugged them back to the ferry. They killed the ferryman for the Yumas, and so that they would have the entire ferry operation. The Yuma Indians, the Yuma natives, said, "That's enough of that." And they killed off almost everybody who was in Glanton's party, with the exception of 4, who went back up into California, complained they had been mistreated. And the government at that point said, well, we have no option but to put somebody down there on the river because we have a lot of 49ers coming through and we don't want them to get hurt. So that was how Fort Yuma came to be built in 1850. We're in the original part of the house. This was a 2-room house built out of adobe, and it was built probably 1872. It's one of the oldest remaining homes in Yuma. Most of them now are on Madison Avenue. This house originally had a dirt floor, and the lady of the house would sprinkle that down with water and sweep it. Eventually it would get just as hard as concrete. She'd put throw rugs on top of that. Families who lived here didn't need more than 2 rooms. Because of the heat here, almost everybody slept outside. They either slept out in the backyard on a cot, or, since most houses had flat roofs, they would climb a ladder and sleep up on the roof. That kept them out of the mosquitoes because Yuma had bajillions of mosquitoes. When this house was originally built, it had a flat roof, and the style in those days was to go down to the river and cut down wood logs like we see up here. Then above this is a layer of willow branches that were laid across the logs, and then above them are layers of arrowweed, which was taken from the river also. Then piled on top of that would be about 6 inches of dirt, and that comprised the entire roof. And that worked great as an insulator. The drawback to it was that when it was dry, the dirt sifted down through all of this and fell on everything, so it was constant upkeep and maintenance. The other downside was when it rained, you had trickles of mud coming down into the room also. Like I said, this was built in the early 1870s. There were a succession of families who lived in this house. In the early 1890s, E.F. Sanguinetti moved into this house. He was a youngster when he came to Yuma by himself. He was 16 years old. He came from the goldfields of California where he was born. Came over here and went to work for a family friend who had a general merchandise store. Slept in the storeroom on a shelf for a while. Then eventually became partners, and then eventually bought out the store manager or the store owner that he was working for. He bought this house in the 1890s and through his lifetime added on to it. The very last room was added on in the 1940s. He stayed in this house until his death in the 1940s, and as I said, he added on to it. He and his wife had 3 children born in the 1920s. This organ that we're looking at is interesting because that belonged to Mary Elizabeth Post. That came up the river on a steamboat. Miss Post was the second school teacher to come to Yuma, and she stayed here. She came in 1873, stayed here until her death in the 1930s. She is the best known school teacher in Yuma. Dedicated her life to teaching children, never married, had a high interest in politics and what was going on in the world, and loved discussing that. Started as a founding member several women's clubs here that were dedicated to educating women and keeping them up on what was going on in the world. The railroad arrived in Yuma in 1877. It came in from California. So we had the first railroad to arrive. We had the first railroad bridge was built here at Yuma. It was built of wood, and over the years the wood bridges either burned or were taken out in floods. And eventually a steel bridge was built to take away the problems with the floods. Railroad was a major employer in this area. Yuma became a division point, and at one time almost everybody in town or some member of their family worked for the railroad. And in the 1940s, it was of very crucial importance because it was carrying the troop trains back and forth across the nation. Yuma was a very, very busy area during that time period. There are rumors and stories that the Spanish were mining here and that also there were various Frenchmen in the Yuma County area who mined, and we have all kinds of lost Frenchman mines. The area up at Stone Cabin is supposed to have been a French-operated area, but there's almost no documentation to substantiate any of this. What we know of Yuma County doesn't start until after the 49ers have come through here, and many of them on their way back home stopped in this area, which they had passed through very rapidly in their haste to get to California. And they came back through here and said, well, there are a lot of mountains here. We wonder if there's anything to be found here. So they started doing a lot of exploring, and they found 3 main minerals here, and that was gold and silver and copper. And those were heavily mined, most of them for about 10 years. About 1910, most of these mines played out. They lost the vein, or they mined out everything that could be found, and then they were closed down. We're in the Sanguinetti Gardens, and these were put in by E.F. Sanguinetti. When he moved here, if you look at the old pictures of Yuma, you see almost all of the yards are just a sea of sand. There might be 1 or 2 small trees or bushes, and most of the fences were made out of ocotillo ribs. And the reason for the sparsity of the vegetation was that in those days, if you wanted water, you went down to the river with a barrel, and you came back with a barrel full of water. And you set that water up on the porch, and you let that settle out, and by the time it settled in a couple of days, about 1/3 of the bottom of the barrel was full of silt. And that water was your drinking, your cooking, your washing, your bathing water, and what was ever left over, that was what you could use to water plants. And so unless you wanted to pay somebody to bring multiple buckets of water down and then pour that on the plants, people didn't have much. And it's when the railroad finally put a water line that came down Madison Avenue, and the railroad did come down right through the middle of Madison Avenue, and they put a water line here, then they allowed the residents along Madison Avenue to draw water off of that water line. And at that point, Sanguinetti, who had been to Italy with his parents because they were native Italians, he loved Italy, he saw the birds over there, he saw all the vegetation. So he tried to somewhat duplicate what he'd seen over there, and nobody knew what would really grow in Yuma. Over his lifetime, he tried 4,000 varieties of plants just to see what would function here. He brought in the birds. He had peacocks, he had guinea hens, he had parrots, all kinds of parrots, some of the smaller birds. And this was the place to come for parties because it was so beautiful, and he, being a social man, had an awful lot of parties here. This is our gift shop and bookstore, and in here we carry a huge selection of Yuma and Arizona books. We also have an archives that has all kinds of documentation about Yuma, Yuma County, and Yuma's families. And we invite anybody who's interested to give us a call and set up a time and come on down and research your family or some aspect of Yuma history. Our address is 240 Madison Avenue, and you can contact us by email at azhistyuma@azhs.org. You can also look us up on the website, and it's basically arizonahistoricalsociety.org. We're open Tuesday through Saturday from 10 until 4 p.m. We're open all year round.
Lamar Advertising Company, the nation's leading outdoor advertising firm. Lamar, tell them you're here. Think big business. Think small business. Think Lamar. 928-783-4436.
You enjoy the convenience of a good cup of coffee. Enjoy the convenience of flying out of Yuma International Airport. For your business travel, Yuma International Airport.
Desert Veterinary Clinic. yeah, we also see dogs and cats. Desert Veterinary Clinic. Give us a call at 928-783-5010. West 23rd Street in Yuma. No commitment, no results.
I'm Johnny Cloud. We're at the Cloud Museum out in Bard, California, 10 miles north of Yuma on Highway S24. I was born and raised here in Yuma and started collecting antiques about 21 years ago. I have 120 antique vintage vehicles in the museum. I am open from 9 in the morning till 4 in the afternoon, 7 days a week during the winter months. My grandfather moved to Yuma in 1917, worked on farms. My father farmed in the area, and I have been farming. And when I retired from farming, I started collecting vehicles and putting this together, and this is what I have. We're in front of the service station that is on the site. There's a 1931 motorhome underneath the service station, one of the first motorhomes built. And all these cars here, even though they're rusty and don't look too good, all of them run. Every one of them was driven in here and parked. Would you like to hear a Model T Ford run? I'll start one up for you. This is a 1923 Dodge. Sometimes I drive it in the parade, so I keep it registered. It has a trunk on the back, like the old cars did, and that's why they call the trunk a trunk. This is kind of an unusual vehicle. It is a 1922 Chevrolet Model T truck, and the Chevy Club only knows of 5 more of them still in existence. This is a picture of the Model T Fords when they first come out and the prices that they charge for them in 1928. This is a 1914 Model T Runabout Roadster. I put it together from parts. It will soon be 100 years old. It has carbide headlights. The headlights run off of acetylene gas. They didn't have electric lights at that time. It's just a lot of antique cars and other antiques here. Come and see it if you have a chance.
At Tuscany Surgical Center, our qualified staff is proud to offer excellent, quality outpatient surgery in a relaxed environment. Our state-of-the-art facility is designed with innovative architecture and decor that guarantees a pleasant and stress-free experience. We also offer procedures at reduced cost and with simplified payment plans. We accept most insurances as well as cash customers. Tuscany Surgical Center, 2851 South Avenue B, Suite 2801 in Yuma. Call 928-817-8900. On the web, find us at TuscanySurgicalCenter.com. Maya's Construction. Quality work in a timely manner. Additions, remodeling, patios, garages, carports, enclosures. Maya's Construction. Call 928-726-5983. Maya's Construction. Quality work in a timely manner. On-track overhead doors located at 2862 South Avenue B in Yuma. Commercial and residential. For free estimates, call 928-726-5295.
Yuma, a community of people. People who share common needs and concerns. It's me, it's you, it's our neighbors. We are Yuma. We can make Yuma an even better community, but we need to know what's happening every day right here at home. That's why we need the Yuma Sun. For over 100 years, the Yuma Sun has been telling Yuma's story. The who, the what, the where, the when, and the why. The Yuma Sun, delivering Yuma to your front door. Subscribe today.
Come visit the new and improved Z Fun Factory with bumper boats, go-karts, miniature golf, a jungle gym, and arcade. Z Fun Factory is Yuma's family-oriented fun center. Z Fun Factory, now open 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. daily. Z Fun Factory, located at 4446 County 10th Street right here in Yuma.
Let's go on a journey into the Wild West.
My name is Alan Armstrong from Castle Dome City. I went down this mine, and my friends, it's 150-foot vertical, and then it goes into a tunnel. And I was walking down the drift, and I was by myself, and it was very quiet and very dark, and I had a flashlight, and it was like, how would you like to have this mine? It's like the Lord spoke to me, and I said, I would like to have this. I believe in providence. This place was meant to be. A lot of people used to get Castle Dome Landing and Castle Dome City kind of mixed up. But Castle Dome City is where the mines were, and Castle Dome Landing is where the riverboats came. And then what they do is they'd go through Port Isabella, and it would take about 23 days to get from San Francisco to here. Everything pretty much came from San Francisco. That was a hardware store. So what would happen is the riverboats would come in with all their supplies, and they would park at Castle Dome Landing, and this is where everything was staged. There was a post office. There was about 1,000 people living there, and by 1905, there was even a baseball field. And from here, they would take the ore up the trails, and they would end up at the mines, which was about an 18-mile journey. And in 1875, they built the largest wagons in the world to accomplish this. And these wagons would haul 40,000 pounds or 20 tons. And they were bigger than the borax wagons in Death Valley. And they'd take at least 40 animals, mules and horses to pull this load. And by 1878, Castle Dome was larger than Yuma. Had about 3,500 people here. This was actually one of the best poor man's mining camp in the world, for real. What I mean by that is the infrastructure was here. The ore was in place, and then the big mining company, Castle Dome Mining and Smelting Company, left in about 1878. So when they left, you still had the steamboats, you still had the ore was 40 ounces per ton silver, and they got paid in advance. They didn't have to have it assayed. So it became known as one of the best grubstake mining camps in the world. Because see, you could come here and you could work and you could make money as a small guy. You didn't have to be a large company with waiting 2 or 3 months to get the assay on how much this ore was and how much it was in this mine over here, because it was all the same for 7 miles. So it was a unique opportunity for the average man to make a decent living. The way they used to do things a lot was they would recycle every piece of wood in every box. They would build cabinets, they would build chests or drawers, or they would use them for siding, and so nothing was wasted because they'd get everything was shipped in wood. And these are all cantaloupe, and they're local cantaloupe and local produce. This is the primitive stuff that was left behind, outside. Most of the stuff was outside. And that number 4 crock was kind of neat because we were able to find every piece. It'd fallen down on the desert pavement and broken, but every piece was there. As you can see, we glued it back together. It's like putting a big puzzle together. When we'd go underground, these Napopo coffee bags would be there, and they didn't waste a thing, so they'd have a shipment of coffee come in here, and these bags are 70, 80 years old, and or more. Some of them are 100 years old, and you can see how well preserved they were. They used them up, and then they had sugar cane, they had coffee. The can lids here are baking powder and coffee. That's 1880, and you can see the big solder spot on top of the can, because they would use lead solder to and that's an 1880 can with a label on it. That's kind of unusual to find. One day, my sister had sent me a little thing that said, oldest Levi's in the world found. And I said, I got that pair. They were Levi Strauss pair of pants, and they were dated 1890 to 1900. And they're some of the oldest pair in the world. There's 5 pairs in that vintage. And Levi Strauss authenticated the date on those. Similar pair sold for $45,000. This shirt right here is about 1880. And we found it in some of the old workings, and you can see the old buttons. No, I'm not sure what the brand is, but you can see the blood splatter on the shirt. A lot of the women figures in Castle Dome seem to be more enduring because the men would come and go, but like Eliza DeLuce, she was here 45 years. She had a couple hundred men, and she would walk down the fault, and she knew the ore was in the fault. She'd say, dig here. This is a Flora Temple vein, and the vein just runs right along here on a straight line. This is about a 70-degree incline. You can see the incline goes right in like the ladder. This goes 155 feet. And if you drop down a shaft right here, you can end up all the way over by the base of that hill. And there's about 30 shafts right here, just one right after another. And you can kind of get a sense of some serious mining happened here when you look out over the landscape. They had 100-ton, 150-ton a day capacity. They got 5,000 tons out of this hole by 1878. 200,000 ounces of silver came out of this one hole. And so they built these wagons that would haul over 40,000 pounds of ore. It would take 40 horses or 40 mules to pull one wagon at least. Here's a 250-pound chunk of galena. See, if you took and broke this in half, you'd have really lustrous galena. It would look like a silver dollar. And see, this thing weighs 250 pounds. You can rock it on the table, but it weighs 250 pounds. And so, see, if you put this kind of ore concentrated in that wagon, you could see how it would add up really fast. We high-graded some ore. And this is a 250-pound brick. You have to add 2,000 degrees in a blast furnace. You have to grind the ore to powder. Then you put it in a blast furnace at 2,000 degrees. And then you add potash, potassium, borax, and whole wheat flour. And the proportions have to be exact or it'll burn up. And you leave it there for 20 minutes. He was really into making the biggest brick in the world. So he did some research and he came up with 250 pounds. So there it is. Lots of men died in these holes in the early days. It wouldn't take a lot for this to cave. And they, in those days, there was no attempt of rescue. They buried them in gunny sacks, no coffins. So no clothing, no tools, no nothing. All these dugouts made a semicircle around here, and they were to fortify and to protect themselves. And right here is a horse wind. What the horse would do is walk around circles, and it would be like a power takeoff, and he could run his ore bucket up and down in the mine. And they could move up to 10 tons a day with one horse. Yeah, this is a Jumbo J, sputters they called them. And they were used to drill wells mostly. And this was out on the north side of the refuge. They were going to clean this up, and they said, you have 2 weeks, Alan. I said, I want it. I'd like to have that. I think it'd be great. And they said, you got 2 weeks. And so I started looking for contractors who could move it. And they weren't biting. They didn't want to look at it. They wanted months' notice, and I said, I got to get this thing moved quick. How much is it going to cost? What do we got to do? The base was open, so I drove in there, went to the commander's office, walked upstairs, knocked on the door, and they said, how can we help you? And I said, I got a job for you. 2 weeks later, this thing was sitting here. This is Adam's cabin. Adam's cabin was originally built around the turn of the century, but this is the cabin that Adam lived in around the turn of the century, and this is pretty much a typical mining cabin for an individual prospector. And Adam lived in this cabin for about 25 years. Sometimes they would move underground about 20 to 30 feet, because the underground would be about 85 in the summer and 80 in the winter. So, 85 degrees is a lot better than 120. Well, there was a man named Colonel Snively, and he's considered Arizona's first citizen. And he discovered the first ore strikes in the state of Arizona before it was even a state. He followed the old blazes on the saguaros and the old worn trails, and he ended up at Castle Dome City, which was about 20 miles north of Gila City. And what he found there was pretty interesting. He found an old mining camp that was abandoned. The Spanish had extensively mined Castle Dome in the late 1600s, and what they had done is they had left in a hurry because the Indians had killed all the Spanish. General Sherman in the 1870s says, well, we had a war with Mexico so that they would, so we could get this country. We should have another war so they'll take back Arizona, because it was such a desolate place. But after Colonel Snively discovered these ore strikes, Arizona was a keeper. see there Cooper and Woods, but that was a local brewery in Yuma, and these bottles they're like improved bottle, and they're like 1860 about. And one day I was digging around in a dump on the floor of Temple 9, and in the solid rocks was this basket. Well, what happened here is when we first got here to the graveyard, and we weren't too sure if it was really a graveyard, so we exhumed one to see. And what we did is they're about up to your knees deep, and so we laid a blanket out, carefully exhumed it to see if it was actually a grave. And the one we exhumed turned out to be his head. What happened to him? And was it during the Apache Wars, the retaliation for when the Apache chief was taken captive? Was it a horrific mining accident, or was it a superstition? It's one of Castle Dome's mystery, but his head never went in the ground. There's about 17 graves over there. What's fascinating about Castle Dome is how the ingenuity of the people and how they would use things that today we wouldn't even have a thought of reusing, like this bucket here. I mean, you can see they put some cloth in here and they wired it up, and so nothing really ever died. Like this is an original water bag from the 1860s. I found it on the drift of the oldest working in Castle Dome. And here's a rake, a mucking rake, and you can see they got square nails drove in here and they wire wrapped it. This is how they were mucking the ore out of a drift and then collecting it, and then they'd set it in these ore buckets, and then they had these little hand cars like this. These little hand cars that they would push in the tracks in the mines. In 1872, you had a federal mining law. And see, so before the federal mining law, a district like this would get together. Castle Dome had its own constitution for mining laws, which makes it very fascinating. If you were attacked by an Indian or lack of water, you wouldn't forfeit your claim. A neat story happened here. There was a lady named Carmelita Mayhew, and she came through here around 1902 on a stagecoach. And she was very beautiful, and there was a guy named Felix Mayhew, and Felix Mayhew had just sold the North Star mine for about $250,000 around 1903. And she wowed him. And so they got together. And then what she did is she came back to Castle Dome a number of years later. And she had a brothel here. And this is her story, and her place is in here. Carmelita Romero was her original name, and then it became Carmelita Mayhew when she married him. And this guy, after he sold the mine, he would rent a train from here to San Diego and have the whole train to himself, and he'd light his cigars with $50 bills. He thought his money would never end. Yeah, he went bankrupt, and he used to sit around in Carmelita's bar. Carmelita eventually went to Yuma, and she had a bar, and he'd sit in the corner of the bar, all depressed. And then we went and found her grave. It's kind of neat. It's well kept. And then when some lady was here, and she said, yeah, when she was in the nursing home, she died about 1978. When she was in the nursing home, she used to call out for somebody. In the 30s, when she was out here, she would hire illegals. And then what she would do is right before payday, she'd call the feds. So she never had to pay her workers.
My name is Mary Lou. I'm a volunteer here. I am dressed as Carmelita Mayhew today, and I would like to tell you the story of these people here in the cantina. Well, one afternoon, this dark stranger down here rode into Castle Dome City. Came from Tombstone, is what they tell me. So that evening when the dark stranger stepped into the cantina, the stranger yelled out, Juan, what are you doing with Rosita? She is my woman. You get away from my girl. The next thing you know, pistols were pulled and shots were fired. Oh, Juan Legos lying dead on the cantina floor. And that happened in Castle Dome City in 1901. If you go to the cemetery, you'll find Juan Lego's grave over there.
There was a shooting, January 28, 1898. Barbaro Hernandez fired down a mine shaft at Francisco Gutierrez. And so they had a discussion, and then they were sitting around a table, and then things got out of hand, and the guy opened fire with a shotgun. Nobody was killed at point blank range. It's hard to believe, isn't it? And the judge came out here, and they said that one of the guys had been smoking marijuana. This is back in 1898. He had been smoking marijuana, and said they had taken his windlass. We're in the hotel, original staircase, square nails, original wainscot bar, original linoleum, original flooring, and original tin ceilings. If you went from Yuma to Prescott, you'd stop at Castle Dome City. And it would take you 52 hours to take a stagecoach, so the stage would stop here, where you could have a cheap meal and wait for the stage, and they'd take care of your luggage in here. Castle Dome right there, that's a volcanic core. After the volcano blows up, what happens is the lava dome rises up, and everything that's soft or crummy erodes away, and he ended up with a unique plug. That's a unique geological feature. You can see that from Yuma, and it's been a great landmark for years. And everywhere you go in Yuma, it's a famous volcanic core. The mining is what started Yuma on the map. And then when people say it's just like they left, that's the ultimate compliment for me. When it's a ghost town, but it's still old and nothing's brand new, but you want to give people a tour back into how life was and what could have been and how it was and what thing was like, instead of everything is not brand new old.
If you want your own journey into the Wild West, visit Alan and Stephanie Armstrong in Castle Dome. It's only about 50 minutes on Highway 95 with a simple right at milepost 55. Call 928-920-3062 for hours and more information.
White Sheet Shopping Guides. With over 300,000 weekly readers, affordable rate structures, targeted zoning, and free ads, it's no wonder why the White Sheet is Yuma's best way to advertise. The White Sheet provides you with the best dining, shopping, entertainment, recreation, and lots more, serving both the Colorado River communities and Imperial Valley, both on the web and in print. Allows you to bring your business to a greater market. Get your advertising seen. Check out the White Sheet today at www.whitesheetonline.net.
Better sleep for better health and a better life.
Hello, my name is Claude Bianco. I volunteer here at the Camel Farm. I've been here about 5 years, and so far it's been pretty successful. A lot of people love it when they come out. They say it's a very nice thing that we're doing, and we like doing it. The reason I'm here is because I love animals.
On March 14th, 1856, the first camels arrive in North America as a military project, the U.S. Camel Corps.
The Camel Farm has been here for at least 20 years. Since then, it's become a breeding farm. Also, we've opened up another part of the farm for showing different animals, different exotic animals.
Camels were used for transportation across the desert until the start of the Civil War, when the project was abandoned, and many of the camels were sold to private owners in the U.S. and Canada.
In this pen here, we have one bull and probably about 12, 13 females. You can't have two bulls together because the bulls will fight over the females. Over to the left over here, we have two babies that they vary from ages from about 15 to probably about 25, 30 years old. They can live an average about 4 years old. Some of these are getting pretty old. And lately we've been keeping the little baby females to replenish the herd.
Camels are well suited to the desert environment, being able to withstand hot, dry conditions better than most animals due to their heavy coat and extremely efficient use of water. The Camel Farm is located at County 16th Street and South Avenue 1E. Call 928-627-7511 for more information.
Production All-Stars. The following is an important message for all models, aspiring models, new actors, and undiscovered talent. It's the Daily Courier. Mile-high motocross madness of the mountain.
Delivering Yuma to your front door. We offer almost any marketing or production service you can think of. So sit back, relax, and enjoy.
Production All-Stars. Production All-Stars.
To help with your business, advertising, marketing, English and Spanish spoken language commercials, promos, or on-hold messaging, as well as radio commercials and television commercials, call Production All-Stars today at 928-343-2146 or visit us on the web at productionallstars.com.
I believe I can fly. I believe I can touch the sky. I
Ever dreamt of learning to fly and having a bird's eye view of your city from the air?
Fly away. I believe I can fly. I believe I can fly.
Let's fly. Call James McDermott at 928-210-0104. For more information, go to www.letsflyllc.com.
Starting a town. With that thought in mind, after the Korean War, we formed a small group and bought a township. We selected this area first because we could afford it. Downtown Los Angeles was a bit expensive. Second, we drilled a well very deep and discovered an excellent aquifer. Third, we were next to Mexico, a country that I always believed would become a great nation. Fourth, the town of Yuma, Arizona, a small agricultural village, was bound to develop. No one at the time could know that it would grow into a wonderful large town. To remember my beloved parents, I decided to build a granite memorial. In 1997, the trustees of our museum voted to build the granite Marine Corps Korean War Memorial at Felicity, California. 1 year later, the monument was dedicated. As completed monuments reach the Hill of Prayer, we trust that hundreds will be built by our successors. All are of noble purpose. For families, for schools, for colleges, for military memorials, and to illustrate history. Thus, topics are endless, and construction will not cease. Acclaimed as first-rate historic scholarship, with the overall effect of a new art form, the Birth of Aviation Monument was built in 2002. The story is eloquently illustrated with the first balloon, first human flight, first licensing of the Wright brothers as pilots, and other truly significant firsts. For each monument of 100 feet, 6,000 pounds of steel are placed in a trench 3 feet deep, covered by 1,900 cubic feet of cement. 60 panels of granite, each weighing 477 pounds, and 2 triangular end pieces complete the monument. With engineering specifications of 4,000 years, only time will tell. The word Felicity means happiness. Here, Felicity also means culture. The arm of God of Michelangelo, sculpted in bronze, is a sundial and points toward the recently built Hill of Prayer. Ambassador Jean-Marie Daillet, a friend of 20 years, donated the bell, weighing 285 pounds. After being cast in France, the bell was so heavy that we had to rebuild the entire top of the church. At the entrance to Felicity is section number 12 of the original staircase of the Eiffel Tower. Felicity is a central point, based on a children's book, now in its 7th edition, then established by law and recognized by the Institut Géographique National of France. The official center of the world is found inside the pyramid. A totally illogical concept, but no one argues with a fairy tale. On land which extends an unforgettable 5 miles toward the mountains, and with its own exit on Interstate 8, our museum is dedicated forever for park and cultural use. Hence, we are engraving the history of the United States at the end of individual states. Our town, dedicated to remembrance, fulfills our museum mission to engrave in granite highlights of the collective memory of humanity. Thus, our most ambitious endeavor, a central 8-monument history of humanity. In trust that this summary of human achievement and failure will encourage study of the past, thought for the future, and resolve for virtue, in hope that the human race will endure far longer than this stone. And of these begin this 416-panel endeavor. Worthy of the pharaohs, said Prime Minister Mesmer. Preserving memories is the noble concept to which we are forever committed. Finally, I came to America as a young boy, a refugee during World War II, and owing my life to the United States, the least I can do is give something back, not just to the nation, but to the world.
Channel 1 Yuma Productions presents 3 shows, 3 years of production, 3 times a day, Human Life. With its in-depth reports, the heroes of Yuma County, showcasing the many men and women of law enforcement, and Desert Vet ER, a profound look into the lives of local veterinarians, 3 times a day, every day, only on Time Warner Cable Channel 2. To find out how you can get involved in our community show, visit us on the web at channel1yuma.com. If you would like to know more about our show or buy a DVD, visit us on the web at channel1yuma.com or write to us at Channel 1 Yuma, P.O. Box 2708, Yuma, Arizona 85366.